Your opinion is worth less than your paycheck. The crystal glass trembled in her hand. Around them, executives laughed. Lachlan Knight didn't look at her only through her. A waitress, disposable. Background noise in a room built from stolen code. Careful, she said softly. He smirked and leaned closer. I dare you. Phones lifted. Someone whispered, she's done. What Knight didn't know, what no one in that glittering tower knew, was that the platform he bragged about was written by the woman he had just humiliated. And buried inside it was a key. He thought he owned the future. He had just handed it back to its architect. The air at Luciole Bleu wasn't just air. It was a carefully curated, oxygen-rich environment designed to make $80 an ounce caviar taste like a bargain. Located on the 95th floor of the Chicago Tower, its floor-to-ceiling windows presented the city as a glittering circuit board, a map of power. And tonight, Laurie Petrov was just another component dressed in a starched black uniform trying not to short out. She was good at her job, not just good precise. She could balance 4 plates on one arm, clears throat. Remember that the woman at table 7 was allergic to pine nuts and maintain a look of serene neutrality even when a venture capitalist snapped his fingers at her. Tonight, her neutrality was being tested to its absolute limit. The source of the test was table 12, the Grand Corner booth. The guest was Lachlan Knight. Even if you didn't follow the markets, you knew Knight. He was the CEO of Knight Enterprises, a hydra of tech, finance, and media. His face was plastered on magazine covers, his latest venture being the Aegis financial platform, which he'd boasted was more secure than Fort Knox. To Laurie, he just looked like a man who had never been told no in his life. He was loud, dismissive, and dining with a younger sycophantic man Laurie mentally nicknamed Barrett to be the sheer idiocy in traditional banking. Barrett Knight was booming, gesturing with a $400 steak knife. They're still using code from the 90s. Aegis isn't just a platform, it's a fortress. I built it from the ground up. It's unhackable. Period. Laurie approached to refill his water. Excuse me, Mr. Knight? He didn't even look at her. He waved a hand in her direction. Yes, water, whatever, he continued. I'm telling you, there isn't a hacker on this planet who could find a single flaw. It's a work of art. Laurie moved with quiet efficiency. Her mind, however, was miles away. It was on her tiny apartment in Pilsen, on the stack of overdue bills on her kitchen counter, and most of all, on her 16-year-old brother Matty, whose experimental treatments for his degenerative nerve condition weren't covered by any insurance she could afford. This job, this humiliating, soul-crushing job, was the only thing keeping them afloat. And the best part, Knight laughed a harsh barking sound, is that the government is mandating it for federal transactions. They know it's perfect. As Laurie reached for the water pitcher, Knight, in the middle of another grandiose gesture, slammed his hand backward, striking her arm. The heavy glass pitcher cartwheeled, not onto him, but all over the expensive Italian leather of his companion. Barrett leaped up with a yelp ice and water cascading onto his lap. Silence fell. The restaurant's ambient hum seemed to vanish. You clumsy, Barrett sputtered. Lachlan Knight turned his head, his cold grey eyes finally landing on Laurie. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The temperature of the room dropped 10 degrees. Look at this. He said, his voice a low growl. My VP is soaked. This suit costs more than your yearly salary. You can't even pour water. Sir, you hit my arm. Laurie stated, her voice trembling slightly, but firm. Knight's eyes narrowed. He was offended that she had spoken. Clears throat. I did no such thing. You were careless, incompetent. Mr. Henderson, the restaurant manager, was already gliding over his face, pale and sweating. Mr. Knight, I am so dreadfully sorry. This is unacceptable. Please allow us to fire her. Knight said, simply, turning back to his steak. Henderson froze. Mr. Knight, perhaps we can fire Snorts her now, or I will buy this restaurant by morning and fire you. Am I clear? Laurie felt the blood drain from her face. Matty's medication, the rent. This couldn't be happening. Sir, it was an accident. Knight looked up again, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. You know this is the problem with your generation. No accountability. You're a waitress. You have one job. Pour the water. You can't even do that. I'm building the future of global finance, and you can't handle basic service. He leaned in his voice, dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that all the nearby tables could hear. Let me give you some advice. Stick to what you know, which clearly is nothing. You probably couldn't even log into your own email without help. You're just background. Something inside Laurie, a piece of her that she had kept locked down and dormant for 3 long years, snapped. The tremor in her hands stopped, her spine straightened. You're right. She said, her voice quiet, but carrying the sudden sharp weight of steel. I'm just a waitress, but I'm warning you. Be careful how you talk to people. You have no idea who you're talking to. Knight actually laughed. He threw his head back and laughed, a sound that made the crystal glasses rattle. Warning me, he choked out, wiping a tear from his eye. You, a waitress in a cheap uniform. You're warning me. What are you going to do, spit in my dessert? You talk a big game about your unhackable system. Laurie said, her voice dangerously calm. Aegis, it sounds impressive. It is impressive, Knight sneered. It's beyond your comprehension. Nothing is beyond comprehension, Laurie replied, and nothing is unhackable. This finally stopped him. His smile vanished. He saw the utter lack of fear in her eyes. It angered him. Is that so? He said, leaning across the table. You, the water-spilling oracle, think you know something about my multi-billion-dollar platform? A platform reviewed by the top security analysts in the world. He pulled out his wallet and threw a black, impossibly heavy credit card onto the table. You're fired. Get out. He then looked at her with pure, unadulterated scorn, but just for fun. I dare you, little girl, to find one single flaw in anything I've ever built. Go ahead, try. The restaurant was deathly quiet. Laurie looked at the billionaire, at the smug VP brushing water off his suit, at her terrified manager. She felt the pink slip being written in her mind. She had nothing left to lose. She gave him a small, cold smile. Man, don't dare me. She unpinned her name tag Laurie from her uniform, placed it gently on the table next to his credit card, and walked out of Lille Bleu without a backward glance, the silent diners parting to let her pass. The L train rattled violently as it crossed the Chicago River, the sound screaming in Laur's ears. The adrenaline of the confrontation had faded, replaced by the icy, familiar grip of panic. She was unemployed again. She fumbled for her keys, her hands shaking so badly she could barely fit the key into the lock of her third-floor walk-up. The apartment was small, the smell of old pipes and her neighbours cooking hanging in the air. Laurie, that you Matty, was on the sofa covered in a blanket, his laptop perched on his knees. His fingers, thin and pale, moved slowly over the keyboard. The degenerative disease was attacking his motor neurons, but his mind remained razor-sharp. Hey Matty, you're up late. Couldn't sleep? The new meds make me jittery. How was work? Did Mr. Pompous from table 12 leave you a tip this time? Laurie forced a smile. You could say that. She dropped her bag and sank into the worn-out armchair. The reality of her situation came crashing down. She had let her pride, her old self, speak, and it had cost them everything. Laurie, what's wrong? You look like you just saw a ghost. I got fired, Matty. His face fell. What? Why was it that you jerk again? I swear I'm going to. He tried to sit up, but his body wouldn't cooperate, and he winced in frustration. No, it's okay. It was my fault. I was clumsy. She couldn't bring herself to tell him the truth. She couldn't tell him she had just declared war on a billionaire. It's not okay, Laurie, he said, his voice rising. The clinical trial, the deposit for that, is next week. How are we going to find something? She said, her voice hollow. I always do. Go to sleep. I need to think. He gave her a long, worried look, but knew better than to push. He maneuvered himself to his bedroom, the soft click of his specialized walker echoing on the hardwood floor. Laurie waited until she heard his door close. Then she went to her own room, a space barely bigger than a closet, and knelt by her bed. She reached under it and pulled out a heavy, dust-covered duffel bag. Inside wasn't clothing. It was a laptop, not a sleek modern machine, but a custom-built black brute, scarred and heavy with no labels. It was 3 years old and still more powerful than anything on the commercial market. She hadn't opened it in 1,098 days. She plugged it in. The screen flickered to life, illuminating a simple text-based login prompt. She typed in a 64-character passphrase. Her desktop was blank save for one icon, a stylized K. Laurie Petro hadn't always been a waitress. 3 years ago, Laurie Petro, under the handle Keystone, was a legend in the making at MIT. She wasn't just a coder. She was an architect. Her graduate thesis wasn't a paper. It was a fully functional quantum-resistant encryption protocol she called the Keystone Cipher. It was revolutionary, designed to protect critical infrastructure power grids, financial markets hospitals. She had a partner on the project, a fellow student named Carter Reed. He was brilliant, ambitious, and Laurie had believed her friend. The night before their final presentation, their project server was breached. The Keystone Cipher was stolen and leaked onto the dark web. An investigation was launched. The logs magically had all been altered. Every digital footprint led directly, unequivocally, to Laurie Petrov. Carter Reed, her partner, was the one who claimed to have discovered the breach. He testified against her, his eyes full of fake regret. He'd painted her as a reckless anarchist, a hacker, in the worst sense, looking for a payout. She was expelled, blacklisted. The tech world, the only world she had ever wanted, slammed its doors in her face. The FBI had investigated, but the evidence was so perfectly planted they could only drop the case due to lack of motive. She was free, but she was ruined. She had been forced to disappear, taking on menial jobs first as a data entry clear, then a barista, and finally a waitress, all to pay for Mattia's escalating medical costs after their parents passed. She had buried Keystone and become Laurie. But tonight, Lackland Knight had dug her up. She sat at a small desk, the glow of the black laptop painting her face in shadows. She opened a secure, anonymized browser. She typed in Aegis Platform. She spent an hour reading the marketing material. The press releases the white papers. Knight was, as he'd claimed, rolling it out everywhere. It was set to become the backbone of the New York Stock Exchange. Then she found a technical brief, a deep dive for investors. It detailed the revolutionary patent-pending security architecture. Law's blood ran cold. It wasn't just like her thesis. It was her thesis. The terminology was changed. Keystone Cipher was now Aegis Core. The dynamic trust matrix was Knight's shield. But the structure, the logic, the unique way it handled data packets, it was hers. It was her soul translated into code. Lackland Knight hadn't built this. He had stolen it. But how? The only other person who knew the code inside and out was Law's fingers flew across the keyboard. She searched Lackland Knight CTO. A face smiled back at her from a Forbes article. A familiar, treacherous face. Carter Reed Knight, Enterprise's new CTO on building the future. The betrayal hit her with the force of a physical blow. Carter hadn't just framed her, he had sold her. He had sold her life's work to Lackland Knight for a corner office and a 7-figure salary. The dare from the restaurant echoed in her mind. I dare you to find one single flaw in anything I've ever built. He didn't build it, Laurie whispered, her knuckles white as she gripped the mouse. And I built it with a back door. She had never told anyone, not even her professors. During its creation, she had built a fail-safe, a highly complex obfuscated administrative key, just in case the protocol ever went rogue. A key she had memorized, a key that was part of her very being. Lackland Knight wasn't just an arrogant billionaire who had cost her a job. He was a thief living in a house she had designed. Laurie Petro, the waitress, was gone. Keystone was back, and she was about to turn the key. The next 48 hours were a blur of caffeine and code. Laurie existed in the digital ether, her world reduced to the glow of her monitor. Maddie, seeing the terrifying familiar focus in her eyes, the look she used to get before a coding competition, wordlessly brought her cups of tea and microwave meals, asking no questions. She couldn't just use the back door. That was the first thing they'd look for. Carter knew her. He would have searched for the obvious entry points. No, she had to be smarter. She had to be a ghost. Her first target wasn't Aegis itself. It was the man who had been at the table, Barrett, the VP. He was the weak link. Laurie started by mapping his digital life. It was pathetically easy. Barrett's social media was public. He checked in at Lille Blur. He posted photos of his new car, a Maserati, his new condo on Wacker Drive, and his dog, a golden retriever named Bonus. He was arrogant, but more importantly, he was sloppy. Laurie found his personal email address from a public-facing invite to a tech charity gala. Now she needed a hook. She delved deeper into the public records of Knight Enterprises. She found their email server protocols standard but with a few custom filters. She crafted an email. It wouldn't come from a random address. It would look like it came from inside the company. Specifically from the one man Barrett was most terrified of, Lackland Knight. She spoofed the from address, a simple trick, but she layered it, routing the email's headers through servers in 3 different countries, making it look like a legitimate internally forwarded message. The email subject line was simple: urgent, Aegis launch red flag. The body of the email was a work of art designed to prey on Barrett's ambition and his fear. Barrett, my personal security team, has flagged a potential internal data leak regarding the Aegis launch partners. I am reviewing the logs from an off-site secure server. I need your eyes on this. Now log in to the attached secure portal and review the file named Partner Exposure List XPS. Confirm receipt. I am heading into a board meeting and need this handled before I get out. Do not speak of this to anyone. This is a test of your loyalty. LK. The attached secure portal was, of course, a phishing site, a perfect pixel-for-pixel replica of the Knight Enterprises internal login page. Laurie hosted it on a server that would exist for precisely 60 seconds after the link was clicked. She sent the email at 9:01 a.m., just as Barrett would be settling in with his first coffee. She watched her own terminal for 3 agonizing minutes. Nothing. Had he seen it? Was he forwarding it to it? Then a ping. Credential capture successful. User B. Welch past night is King 2025. Laurie almost laughed. Pathetic. She had Barrett's login. Now she was inside the corporate network, but she was just a low-level ghost. She had Barrett's permissions, which were limited. She couldn't get to the Aegis source code from here, but she could get to the internet. She could get to the employee directory, and she could get to Carter Reed's digital backyard. She moved silently through the network, erasing her logs as she went, using Barrett's credentials as a skin. She found the R and D file server. It was, as expected, locked down, access denied. This was where Carter would be confident. He believed the only way in was through his own or Knight's credentials. He was wrong. Laurie didn't try to break the door down. She went through the air vents. She accessed the server's maintenance logs. She found a list of automated cron jobs, scheduled tasks the server ran for self-cleaning and backups. One of them ran every night at 300 a.m. It was a simple script written by a junior admin that backed up the server's cache to a secondary storage array. And the junior admin had, in a moment of catastrophic laziness, hard-coded his own admin credentials into the script so he wouldn't have to re-authenticate it. Laurie had her admin key. She didn't use it, not yet. That would set off alarms. Instead, she edited the backup script. She added one single line of code. When the script ran at 310 a.m., it would not only back up the cache, it would also find the Aegis source code compress. It encrypt it with her public key and email it to a secure anonymous Dropbox she had created. She logged out. She wiped the traces of B. Welch from the system. She set her phishing site to digitally self-destruct. Then she waited. It was the longest night of her life. She sat in her dark apartment watching the clock. 2:58 a.m., 2:59 a.m., clears throat. At 3 a.m. on the dot, her terminal lit up. Task executed, packet sent, connection terminated. She navigated to a Dropbox. There, it was a single file. Aegis Core Archive RKSC. She typed in her private key, the file uncompressed. It was all there. Millions, Clear's throat, of lines of code. And as she scrolled through the file headers, she saw it. The original metadata Carter had forgotten to scrub. Project Keystone, Clear's throat, author El Petro timestamp 3 years ago. She had the proof. She could ruin Carter. She could expose Knight. She could perhaps get her life back. But as she scrolled, she noticed something else. This wasn't just her code. Carter and Knight had added to it. They had built appendages. She analyzed the new modules. They weren't for security, they were for access. She traced the logic, her fingers flying faster and faster. It was a salami-slicing algorithm. Clear's throat. The Aegis platform set to manage the NYSE was designed to skim. Every time a high-frequency trade was executed, it would round the transaction down to the 8th decimal place and siphon the dust fractions of a cent into an offshore encrypted account. It was invisible. It was untraceable. And with billions of transactions a day, it would add up to, Laurie did the math, hundreds of millions, billions within a year. Lachlan Knight wasn't just a thief. He was running the single largest financial heist in human history. "Man, don't dare me," Laurie whispered to the empty room. This was no longer about her name. This was about stopping a global catastrophe. Suddenly, her screen flashed red. A new window opened. A simple black command prompt. A single line of text typed itself out. "I see you, Keystone. Carter." He had been alerted. He was in the system hunting her. The digital war had begun. Laurie's heart hammered against her ribs. He wasn't supposed to see her. The backup script was clean. "How your cron job was clever, the text appeared but sloppy. You wrote to a log file, your rusty Laurie." He was toying with her. He had her trapped. Her anonymous connection was to a hunter like Carter. A bright red string leading right back to her. She had seconds. She couldn't just pull the plug. He'd have her IP address by then. She had to cut the string and escape. "What do you want, Laurie Carter typed money? Want back in Night will pay? Just don't be stupid." Laurie's fingers flew. She wasn't replying. She was working. She initiated a kernel panic on her own machine. A forced crash. But before the system went down, she executed a fork bomb, a malicious process that replicates itself, exponentially consuming all system resources. She didn't aim it at Carter. She aimed it at the server he was using to trace her. Carter's screen, wherever he was, would suddenly freeze. He'd be inundated with thousands of new process alerts, his own system memory overloading. Laurie hit enter. Her screen went black. Laurie hit enter. Her screen went black. She ripped the power cord from the wall and in one fluid motion tore the battery from the laptop. She was dark. She sat in the silence, breathing heavily. He had her IP, or at least the last proxy she'd used. He would trace it back from the server in Estonia to the one in Singapore, to the coffee shop node in Seattle. It would take him time, but he would find her. He knew she was in Chicago. He knew her name. He knew she was Keystone. And Lachlan Knight was not a man who tolerated threats. She had to run. She woke Matty. "Pack a bag now, just meds and essentials." "Laurie, what's going on?" Clear's throat. "It's 4 a.m. There's no time. I messed up, Matty. I messed up, and some very, very bad people are going to be looking for me. For us." The fear in his sister's voice, a sound he had never heard before, got him moving. As they hurried out of the apartment, Laurie's phone buzzed a number she didn't recognize. She answered her voice low. "Hello, Ms. Petrov." The voice was old, academic and shaky. "This is Professor Dean." Professor Dean, her old mentor from MIT, the only one who had privately expressed his doubts about her guilt. "Professor, how did you get this number?" "That's not important." "Laurie, what have you done?" "What do you mean? I just got off the phone with Carter Reed." He called me at 400 a.m. asking if I'd been in contact with you. He sounded dangerous. He mentioned night enterprises. Laurie, whatever you're doing, you are poking a sleeping dragon with a very sharp stick. He stole my work. Professor Lurie said, her voice cracking as she and Matty descended the emergency stairs. He and Knight, they're using Keystone to build a financial weapon. There was a long silence on the other end. Keystone, Dean breathed. I always knew you didn't do it. But Laurie Lucklin Knight is not just a CEO, he's a monster. He has buried journalists, rivals, politicians. You cannot win this. I have the proof, Laurie said, pushing the fire escape door open into the alley. The cold Chicago air hit her face. I have the original code. I have the financial scam. I clears throat, have everything. And what will you do with it, Dean asked. Go to the press. Knight owns 2 major news networks. Go to the feds. Knight is the feds' new partner. They will bury you. I don't know. Laurie admitted, her confidence wavering. Listen to me, the professor said, his voice urgent. You have the data. Is it secure? Yes. On an encrypted drive currently in my pocket. Good. You need a stage. You can't just leak it. You need to detonate it on a stage so big they can't possibly clean up the mess. Knight. He's giving the keynote at the World Tech Summit at McCormick Place in 2 days. Laurie's mind raced. The Tech Summit. It was the biggest tech event of the year. It would be live-reamed globally to millions. He's launching Aegis globally on that stage. Laurie realized exactly, Dean said. He's going to be broadcasting his untouchable platform. What if it wasn't? A plan, audacious and terrifying, began to form in Laurie's mind. Professor, I need a way in. I may know someone on the AV crew, a former student. But Laurie, if you do this, there is no coming back. You will be a hero, or you will spend the rest of your life in a supermax prison. They took my life 3 years ago. Professor Lurie said, watching a black SUV, one she didn't recognize, turned slowly onto her street. I'm just taking it back. Godspeed, Keystone, Dean said, and the line went dead. The black SUV stopped in front of her building. 2 men in dark suits got out. Run, Laurie whispered to Matty, and they disappeared into the pre-dawn shadows of the city. The next 36 hours were spent in hiding. Laurie and Matty moved between a homeless shelter, a 24-hour diner, and finally a cheap motel near O'Hare. Paid for in cash. Laurie never turned on her phone and used her black laptop only for 30-second bursts on public Wi-Fi. Professor Dean had come through. He'd sent a burner phone to a P.O. box Laurie set up. On it was one message. Name Frank. Team AV Crew Stage 3. He's expecting Keystone's apprentice. He owes me a favor. He'll get you a badge. The final piece was the most painful. She had to get Matty safe. She used the burner to call the only other number she'd memorized. Her estranged aunt in Milwaukee. Aunt Jenna. It's Laurie. I'm in trouble. No, I can't explain. But Matty he's in danger. I need to put him on a bus. Please just meet him at the station. Keep him safe. I'll explain when I can. The phone call with Matty on the platform was the hardest thing she'd ever done. You're coming to get me, right? He asked, his bravado gone, his eyes wide with fear. I am. She lied, her heart breaking. I just have to finish one last job. I love you, Matty. Be brave. She watched the bus pull away, then turned and walked back toward the city that was being hunted. She was now truly alone. The World Tech Summit was a fortress. McCormick Place was swarming with private security and Chicago PD. Lachlan Knight's keynote was the event of the year. Laurie found Frank a stressed-out man with a ponytail and a World Tech Summit crew badge. He looked her up and down. You're smaller than I expected. Dean said you were a wizard. Whatever. Here's your badge. You're an alighting intern. Don't touch anything. Don't talk to anyone. And especially stay clear of the Knight Enterprises crew, their backstage, and their Vipers. Got it, Laurie said, clipping the Ann crew badge to her black hoodie. She was in. She, clears throat, spent the first hour hauling cable boxes, just another face in the army of tech-savvy roadies. She used the time to map the building. Security was tight, but it was all focused on the front of the house on the attendees. The backstage was a chaotic mess of cables, flight cases, and stressed-out technicians. She saw him, clear throat, Carter Reed. He was in a sharp suit, speaking into a headset, pointing angrily at a screen. He looked older, harder. Her target was the main production booth, a glass-walled room at the back of the auditorium. That booth controlled everything: the lights, the sound, and most importantly, the 3-story tall LED screen behind the main stage. She saw her chance when a catering team wheeled a massive cart of coffee and pastries into the booth. The door was propped open. Blending in with the caterers, Laurie slipped inside. The room was dark lit only by a galaxy of monitors. She ducked behind a server rack. "Night is on in 5, a producer yelled. "I want graphics A, B, and D queued. And someone get me a feed from the London market. I want to show the stock spike when he announces." Laurie waited. Her encrypted drive was in her hand, attached to a custom USB adapter she'd built. She needed to get to the main presentation computer. It was on the other side of the room, manned by 2 technicians. She pulled out her burner phone and, using the public Wi-Fi, navigated to the one website she knew would cause a panic. She found the building's fire alarm schematics. She triggered a silent alarm. Not a fire, but a system fault in the sprinkler system in the wing opposite the auditorium. A flashing red light appeared on a wall-mounted security panel. "What's that?" the producer snapped. Looks like a water pressure fault in Hall B. One of the techs said, "I got to call it in." Fine. Go." "Jeff, you're good here, I'm fine." The other tech said, his eyes glued to the screen. One down. "Now for Jeff." Laurie looked around. On the table, a half-dozen empty cans of Surge, a high-caffeine energy drink. Laurie sent a simple anonymous text message to the production room's main line. "Emergency. The Surge batch code XF300 has been recalled. Contamination. Check your cans." The phone pinged. Jeff looked at it annoyed. He read the message. His eyes went wide. He looked at the mountain of empty cans on his desk. Oh no. He grabbed his stomach. I think I'm going to be sick." He bolted from the room, heading for the bathroom. Laurie was alone. She moved fast. She had maybe 60 seconds. She plugged the USB drive into the main console. A dialog box popped up. Drive detected. She didn't run an executable. That would be blocked. She had loaded her proof as a video file, an ultra-high-definition 8K video file. The system was designed to play video. She opened the presentation queue. There was Knight's perfectly polished intro video and his Aegis demonstration. Clear's throat. She slotted her file right in between them. She named it Aegis Demo Final 2. A simple common sense change. The tech, when he came back, would just click the next file in the queue. She pulled the drive, slipped back behind the server rack, and out the door in the ensuing chaos of another catering delivery. No one saw her. She found a dark corner in the catwalks above the stage, a perfect vantage point. The lights went down. The music swelled. A spotlight hit the stage. Lachlan Knight walked out to thunderous applause. From the shadows of the catwalk, high above the auditorium, Laurie watched the world she was about to break. The air was cool and still smelling of dust and electricity. Below her, the stage was a blazing island of light in a sea of darkness. The ambient bass of the introduction music vibrated through the metal grate. She was perched on a low rhythmic thrum against her boots. Her heart, however, was beating its own frantic counter-rhythm. She was in crew a ghost in the rigging invisible. But Keystone was downstairs, a digital time bomb sitting in the queue. The music swelled to a crescendo. The 3-story tall LED screen exploded in a golden shimmering graphic of the Aegis logo. A voice of God announcer boomed. "Ladies and gentlemen, the man building tomorrow, Mr. Lachlan Knight." The applause was thunderous. A tidal wave of sound rolled across the auditorium as Lachlan Knight strode onto the stage. He was every master showman, dressed in an immaculate $20,000 suit, his silver-black hair perfect. He beamed, his arms outstretched, basking in the adoration. He was a king in his court. Thank you," he said. His voice, rich and confident, projected to every corner of the massive hall. What a day! What a moment! He began to pace his movements, practiced, charismatic. Today is not just another day, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, exciting tone. Today is the day the future begins. Laurie watched her knuckles white as she gripped a steel support beam. She saw the man from the restaurant. The man who had dismissed her, who had cost her a job, who had built an empire on her stolen soul. For decades, our financial systems have been vulnerable. Knight continued, his face a mask of earnest concern. They have been slow. They have been weak. We have built our global economy on a foundation of digital sand until today. On the massive screen behind him, the Aegis logo pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Today, Knight Enterprises gives you ages. He boomed. The crowd erupted again. He let them cheer, smiling like a benevolent father. It is not just a platform. It is a promise of security, a promise of speed, a promise of perfection. He clasped his hands, the picture of humility. But his eyes were gleaming. We have subjected Aegis to every test, thousands of penetration tests from the greatest security minds on the planet. And the result? He paused, letting the silence hang. 0 breaches, 0 vulnerabilities. The applause was deafening. It is, he said, his voice dropping, forcing the enter room to lean in. And I say this with absolute, unshakable certainty, the single most secure, untouchable piece of technology ever designed by man. Designed by me, Laurie thought, her jaw tightening. And you never should have dared me. Now, Knight said, turning to the screen with a flourish, let me show you how it works. In the production booth at the back of the auditorium, Laurie could just make out the flurry of activity. The producer snapped his fingers. Cue the demo. Go, Jeff. Go. Jeff, still looking pale from his energy drink. Scare nodded his eyes on his console. He saw the presenter's cue. He saw the next file in the playlist, the one that had been updated just minutes ago. Aegis Demo Final V2. It was the logical choice. He clicked play on stage. Knight was still talking. Clear his throat. You are about to witness in real time anew. He stopped. The golden Aegis logo behind him had vanished. The screen flickered for a split second. It was black. Then, simple green monospaced text appeared. The kind of text Knight associated with low-level coders, not his multi-billion-dollar presentation. Project Keystone Knight hadn't turned around yet. He was still facing the audience, his smile faltering, annoyed by the glitch. A little anticipation he had lived, shooting a dark look toward the booth. Then the next line of code appeared. Author El Petro timestamp 3 years ago, the crowd murmured. This wasn't a polished graphic. This looked raw. This looked like evidence. Knight finally turned. He looked at the 50-foot-tall screen. His smile didn't just freeze, it shattered. The color drained from his face, leaving a sickly waxy sheen under the hot lights. What is this? He hissed, his voice accidentally carried by the microphone. Get that off there. What are you doing in the booth, Chaos? It's not responding. Jeff yelled, frantically clicking the mouse. I'm locked out. The file. It sees the console. Cut the feed. Go to black. The producer roared. I can't. It's in the main feed. It's going out on the live stream. I can't kill it. On stage, Knight tried to regain control. A slight technical difficulty, but the screen changed again. Clear's throat. It was no longer code. It was a file directory. Law's file directory, and highlighted in red Egypt Core Archive R. Then it changed again, a Clear's throat, spreadsheet, a ledger offshore transfer account, 7749 B Grand Cayman. A list of transactions began to scroll fast. Date source trade amount 034. Date source trade amount. Salami slicing the fractions of pennies siphoned from millions of trades. It was incomprehensible until the audience saw the box at the bottom of the screen. Clear's throat. Current total 481 tons and 392 tal 012.114. And it wasn't a static number, it was ticking up. 481, 392, 01278, 481, dawn, 392, 013 to 121, 481. Dawn 392-01405. The crowd let out a collective, horrified gasp. They were watching live the theft of millions of dollars. The unhackable system was a high-tech vacuum cleaner, and Knight was holding the plug. "Shut it down!" Knight roared, his voice no longer smooth, but a raw, panicked shriek. He slammed his hand on the podium. "Shut it down! This is a malicious attack. This is a lie." The screen flickered one last time. The ledger vanished. It was replaced by a single grainy photograph, a selfie taken in a brightly lit computer lab of two smiling, proud college students, a young Laurie and a young, ambitious Carter Reed. Backstage, Carter, who had been watching the meltdown on a monitor, felt his blood turn to ice. He saw the photo. He saw her. He knew. He sprinted from the wings, heading for the stage, yelling, "Kill the power! Kill the main power!" But it was too late. The audio system, seized by the same script, crackled to life. It wasn't the corporate music. It was the tiny secret recording of a phone call. Knight's voice. "Don't care how you do it, Reed. Just get it. The keystone code. Buy it, steal it. I don't care. I want it." Carter's voice. "She'll never sell. She's a purist, but I can handle it. The framing will be easy. Her digital hygiene is sloppy. She trusts me." Knight's voice. "Good. Make it happen. You'll be my CTO. Just handle the girl." The auditorium was utterly, profoundly silent. The implications of that last line, "handle the girl," hung in the air like poison gas. Lachlan Knight was frozen. His ashen face was a mask of pure primal terror. He looked like a man who had just watched his own execution. Carter Reed had skidded to a halt at the edge of the stage, his momentum gone. He and Knight stared at each other across the stage, a chasm of mutual ruin between them. They were exposed, annihilated, and from the darkness of the catwalks above, a single figure emerged. A confused spotlight operator, trying to find the source of the technical problem, swung his beam away from the stage and into the rigging. And there she was, Laurie Petro, still in her black hoodie and a crew badge, standing in the sudden bright circle of light. Knight looked up. His mouth opened a silent. Oh, he saw her. The waitress, the background, the girl he had dared. She didn't have a microphone. She didn't need one. In the dead tomb-like silence of the room, her voice, cold and clear, carried to every corner. "Man," she said, "don't dare me." The first sound that cut through the auditorium's stunned silence was not applause. It was the measured, heavy tread of leather shoes on the aisle carpet. Two men, previously anonymous in their front row seats, stood up. They were unremarkable in their plain-clothed suits, yet they moved with an authority that silenced the rising tide of whispers. They stepped onto the stage, ignoring the flashing cameras from the press pit, and walked calmly toward the two frozen figures. One of them flipped open a badge, the gold shield gleaming under the stage lights. "FBI," he said, his voice amplified by the still live microphone on the podium. "Mr. Knight, Mr. Reed, you need to come with us." They hadn't been tipped off by Lurie. They had been tipped off by Professor Dean, who, the moment he knew Laurie was inside, had made one high-stakes call to a trusted former student, now a deputy director in the Bureau's cybercrime division. Watch the World Tech Summit live stream. Dean had said, his voice grim, "And I suggest you bring handcuffs." The evidence broadcast globally and now looping on the massive screen was irrefutable. Chaos finally erupted. "This is a lie." Knight sputtered, his face a mask of purple rage. He lunged for the agent. "It's a deep fake, a corporate attack. Security, get them off my stage." The agent didn't flinch. He simply sidestepped Knight's lunge and in one practiced, non-negotiable motion spun the billionaire around and cuffed his hands behind his back. The clicks of the ratchet were deafeningly loud. Carter Reed, on the other hand, offered no resistance. He had simply crumpled, sinking to the stage floor. He put his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. The architect of the unhackable system, the man who had framed his friend, was broken. He was a ghost long before the agents hauled him to his feet. As the press surged forward, shouting questions and building security finally ran in from the wings, Lori Petro was already moving. She didn't run. She didn't panic. She slipped back from the catwalk's edge into the darkness of the service tunnels. She moved with the quiet efficiency of the waitress. She had been invisible by design. She used the very chaos she had authored as her cover down a service ladder, through a concrete hallway smelling of dust and ozone, and out a side fire escape. The cold, damp Chicago air hit her face. It felt like the first real breath she had taken in 3 years. She pulled her black hood up, blending into the lunchtime crowd of office workers who were still oblivious to the corporate earthquake that had just happened a block away. She walked to the L station, just another face in the crowd, and disappeared. The story didn't just dominate the news, it was the news. The summit takedown. One headline blared, "Billionaire take down Knight's Aegis platform." A multi-billion-dollar fraud screamed another. The looped footage of Knight's arrest and Carter's confession by proxy was on every screen in every airport bar and break room in the world. Knight Enterprises, built on a foundation of stolen code and public arrogance, imploded. Its stock was halted, then delisted. It ceased to exist in less than 72 hours. Lori watched it all from a pay-by-week motel in Milwaukee. She had taken the first bus out of Chicago, her encrypted drive safe in her pocket. The first and only call she made was to her Aunt Jenna. When Matty got on the phone, his voice was choked with tears and awe. "Lori, is it? It's really over. I saw it on the news. They were calling you Keystone. They said you were a hero." Lori closed her eyes, leaning her head against the cool glass of the bus station window. "I'm just a waitress, Matty," she whispered, a small, real laugh escaping her. "I'm coming to get you." Their reunion was quiet, desperate, and healing. He all but fell into her arms, and for a long time they just held on, the two of them, against the world. She was summoned to testify, of course, but the atmosphere was not one of prosecution. She walked into the U.S. Attorney's office not as a suspect, but as the woman who had single-handedly dismantled the biggest financial criminal of the decade. Her testimony was precise, clinical, and devastating. She provided the original time-stamped code from her old MIT servers. Faced with an avalanche of irrefutable proof, Carter Reed confessed to everything. He detailed the plot to frame her, the theft of her thesis, the pressure from Knight, and the creation of the salami slicing algorithm. His confession, given in a desperate bid for a lighter sentence, was the final signature on Law's vindication. Her name was not only cleared, it was celebrated. 6 months later, Lori stood on a different stage. This one was far more terrifying. The grand auditorium at MIT, the university, in a massive public act of apology and restitution, had not only reinstated her graduate degree, but had partnered with her, providing the seed funding for her new company. She was no longer in a black hoodie. She wore a sharp, custom-tailored suit, but her hair was pulled back in the same practical, no-nonsense way. Behind her, a new logo glowed on the screen, a simple, elegant arch. Keystone Security. In the front row, Matty sat his posture straighter, his colour better. He was enrolled in a new cutting-edge clinical trial, the best in the world, funded by the restitution trust Knight had been forced to pay. Next to him sat Professor Dean, who Lori had pulled out of retirement to be her company's new vice president of ethics. Security isn't about building walls. Lori said, her voice calm and strong, projecting to the packed room of students, faculty, and tech leaders. It's not about arrogance or about building something unhackable, and it's about transparency. It's about accountability, but most of all, it's about people. She looked out at the sea of faces. The world is full of people who are overlooked. The waitress, the janitor, the intern, the background. We dismiss them, we underestimate them, we dare them. We forget that they are the ones who see everything. They are the ones who know where the real flaws are. She smiled a small, confident smile that reached her eyes. Keystone Security is not just a company. It's a new philosophy. We hire the overlooked. We find the underestimated. We seek out the keystones and we give them the keys because the person you dismiss might just be the one who built the entire building. The room was silent for a beat. Then a single person began to clap, then another and another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet, a thunderous standing ovation rolling over her. Laurie Petrov, the architect, finally home stood in the light, and that everyone is what happens when you underestimate the person pouring you coffee. Lan Knight saw a clumsy waitress. What he didn't see was a digital genius, a modern-day warrior who had been pushed one step too far. He dared her, and she took everything. This story is a powerful reminder. Never ever judge someone by their uniform or their job. The person you dismiss might just be the one holding the keys to your entire kingdom. They might be a keystone. What did you think of Law's ultimate revenge? Was it justice, or was it something more? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you loved this story of karmic justice and an underdog getting her incredible win, please do us a huge favor. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it. And most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring that bell. We have so many more stories of justice, revenge, and hidden power coming your way, and you don't want to miss a single one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next story.